Keith Richards' story begins in Dartford, England on December 18, 1943, in the middle of World War II. Bombs were falling, people were scared, and life was uncertain. His mother, Doris, loved music and often sang around the house, while his father, Bert, had been wounded in the war and carried that trauma with him. Little Keith grew up surrounded by fear but found comfort in sound. He loved listening to his mother's records and the church choir's powerful harmonies. That was where his love for rhythm began, deep, raw, and pure. Life wasn't easy in post-war England. Food was scarce, homes were broken, and people struggled to rebuild. But for Keith, the sound of the guitar was a light in the dark. As a boy, he would sit for hours, listening to old blues and rock records, dreaming of a life far away from the gray streets of Dartford. No one, not even Keith himself, could have imagined that this small, rebellious kid would one day become one of the greatest rock musicians in history. His journey from a shy child of war to an immortal rock icon is nothing short of unbelievable. Sometimes destiny hides in ordinary places. For Keith Richards, it was a small train station in 1961 where his life changed forever. While traveling, he noticed a young man carrying two rare blues records, Chuck Berry's Rockin' at the Hops and the Best of Muddy Waters. Keith couldn't believe his eyes. Those records were nearly impossible to find in England. That young man was Mick Jagger. They started talking, realizing they both adored American blues and shared the same dream, to make real music, the kind that spoke to the soul. That short meeting led to a friendship that would shake the world. Soon after, Keith and Mick teamed up with Brian Jones, Bill Wyman, Charlie Watts, and Ian Stewart to form a band, the Rolling Stones. What started as a small group playing in smoky London clubs quickly became a global phenomenon. By 1964, the Rolling Stones were everywhere. Their raw energy, rebellious image, and blues-inspired sound gave youth a voice. While the Beatles represented polite rebellion, the Stones became the darker mirror of that era, wild, dangerous, and real. And right at the center of it was Keith Richards, the man with the riffs that could set your soul on fire. As the 1960s exploded with cultural change, the Rolling Stones became symbols of defiance. Keith's wild appearance, messy hair, and attitude turned him into a face of rebellion. While Mick was the showman, Keith was the heartbeat, the cool, dangerous guitarist who lived for music and chaos. The band's songs, like Satisfaction and Paint It Black, weren't just hits. They were anthems of a generation refusing to be told what to do. Fame came fast, and so did trouble. Keith's love for danger wasn't just a stage act. It became part of his real life. He lived on the edge, never afraid to take risks. But behind that rock star energy was a creative genius. Keith crafted riffs that were simple yet unforgettable, short bursts of magic that stuck in your head for decades. Still, fame had a dark side. The more famous the Stones became, the more pressure they faced. Drugs, arrests, and endless tours started to take a toll. But Keith seemed unstoppable. To the public, he wasn't human anymore. He was the symbol of rock itself. Yet behind that cool smile, his life was starting to spiral out of control. In the late 1960s, Keith's life changed when he met Anita Pallenberg, a stunning actress who was dating Brian Jones at the time. Anita was wild, fearless, and as unpredictable as Keith himself. Their connection was instant and electric. Soon, Keith and Anita fell deeply in love, creating one of rock's most intense and destructive relationships. They had 3 children together, but their world was filled with chaos, drugs, fame, and tragedy. In 1976, their son Tara died unexpectedly, leaving Keith broken. He later admitted that grief nearly destroyed him. Around the same time, their friend Brian Jones drowned under mysterious circumstances after being pushed out of the band. It was a dark chapter. Keith drowned his pain in heroin, and for years, addiction became his closest companion. His body grew weaker, his face thinner, but his music and somehow I never lost its power. Songs like Angie and Wild Horses carried a haunting beauty that came straight from his pain. Behind the fame and flashing lights was a man quietly losing himself. But even at his lowest, Keith's passion for music refused to die. That stubborn spark would eventually pull him back from the edge. By the mid-1970s, Keith Richards was living dangerously close to death. He was arrested multiple times for drug possession, in France, Canada, and the United States. Every time he was caught, people thought, "This is it. Keith is finished." But he always came back. He once joked that, "Life tried to kill me, but it missed." Beneath the jokes, there was truth. Keith had survived things that would have ended most people. One of the most shocking incidents happened in 1965 when he was nearly electrocuted on stage in Sacramento. He hit an ungrounded microphone with his guitar and was thrown backward in a flash of blue light. Everyone thought he was dead, but miraculously he lived. Even in his darkest days, Keith's love for music remained his lifeline. He found a strange kind of strength in performing, as if every concert reminded him why he was still alive. In the 1980s, he began to pull himself together, thanks in part to his new love, model and actress Patty Hansen. She grounded him, offering stability and real love in a world full of chaos. Slowly, Keith left heroin behind and found his way back to himself. With Patty Hansen, Keith discovered something he had never truly known before: peace. The two married in 1983 and had two daughters, Theodora and Alexandra. Family life gave him balance. He once said that being a husband and father was the greatest role he ever played. But Keith didn't just stop making music. The Rolling Stones kept going strong, decade after decade. While other bands broke up or faded away, the Stones remained a force of nature. Even when critics said they were too old, they proved everyone wrong. In the 1990s and 2000s, Keith and Mick reunited stronger than ever, their bond deeper than fame or ego. Their friendship had been tested by fights, betrayals, and distance, but in the end, it survived everything. Keith also explored solo projects, showing the world that his creativity wasn't limited to the Stones. His 2010 autobiography, Life, became a global bestseller because it was honest, funny, and unapologetic, just like him. People were amazed at how open he was about his addictions, mistakes, and survival. It wasn't just a rock star's story. It was a human story of redemption. By the time Keith entered his 70s, the world began to joke that he might actually be immortal. When the apocalypse comes, people said, the only things left will be cockroaches and Keith Richards. The joke worked because it felt true. Keith had survived everything: drugs, arrests, electrocution, car crashes, and decades of wild living. Yet at 80 years old, he still stood tall with his guitar in hand and a smile that said he'd beaten every odd. His secret? Balance, humor, and love for music. Keith once said, "I'm not immortal, I just refuse to die young." In recent years, he's slowed down, choosing a quieter life with Patty at their home in Connecticut. He enjoys gardening, reading, and spending time with his family, a far cry from the chaos of the 1970s. Still, he hasn't lost his edge. When he walks on stage, that same electric energy fills the air. For fans around the world, Keith isn't just a musician. He's a symbol of resilience. He reminds us that no matter how far we fall, we can always rise again. Today, Keith Richards stands as one of the last living legends of rock and roll, not just because of his music, but because of what he represents. He's proof that passion and art can keep a person alive even through chaos. His riffs shaped generations, his attitude inspired rebels everywhere, and his story became a lesson in survival. Beneath all the fame, Keith has always been more than just a guitarist. He's a storyteller. His life tells us that mistakes don't define you. How you rise after them does. From a little boy born during a war to a man who changed the sound of music forever, Keith Richards' journey is a masterpiece of endurance. Even at 80, his spirit refuses to fade. His story isn't just about rock and roll, it's about being human, flawed, and unstoppable. Every wrinkle on his face carries a story, every scar a lesson. As long as people keep listening to those unforgettable riffs, Keith Richards will never truly grow old. He will remain what he has always been, the beating heart of rock itself. One of the most fascinating parts of Keith Richards' story is his complicated but unbreakable bond with Mick Jagger. Their friendship has lasted for over 6 decades, longer than most marriages, partnerships, or bands in music history. But it wasn't always smooth. Mick and Keith have fought more times than they can count. They've insulted each other in public, refused to speak for months, and even worked on solo projects just to escape the tension. Yet somehow they always find their way back. The truth is, their connection runs deeper than fame or money. Keith once said, "Mick and I are like brothers. We fight, we laugh, but we can't live without each other." They are two sides of the same coin. Mick, the showman who commands the crowd, and Keith, the quiet soul who gives the music its heart. Their chemistry is magic, unpredictable but powerful. Together, they created songs that have become part of history. And no matter how much time passes, when Keith looks over and sees Mick on stage, something inside him lights up again. It's not just about playing music. It's about keeping that spark alive that began on a train platform all those years ago. Many people think of Keith Richards only as the wild man of rock, the symbol of rebellion and survival. But deep down, Keith has always been a thinker, a man who finds beauty in simplicity. He often says that music is not about perfection. It's about feeling. To him, a single honest note means more than 1,000 polished ones. Keith believes that every riff he writes comes from something greater, a mix of instinct, experience, and heart. He once explained that the famous riff from Satisfaction came to him in a dream. He woke up, played it half asleep on a tape recorder, and then went back to bed. The next morning, the riff that changed rock music forever was waiting for him. For Keith, that's proof that music is something spiritual. He never forced it. He let it come naturally like breathing. That approach made his style unique, raw, soulful, and human. His guitar doesn't just play notes, it tells stories. It speaks of love, pain, loss, and redemption. In every performance, even today, you can feel decades of emotion in his playing, the sound of a man who has lived through everything and still found beauty in the noise. There's something deeply human about the way Keith Richards looks at life. Despite all his fame, he has always kept a simple philosophy: keep moving forward. He's faced addiction, loss, and aging, yet he never complains. When asked how he's still alive after everything, he laughs and says, "Pure luck and good music." But behind the humor lies wisdom. Keith knows that pain and joy are both parts of the same song. He once said, "You can't play the blues without knowing what sadness feels like." His survival isn't just physical, it's emotional. He learned how to forgive himself, how to let go, and how to find peace in small things. He loves spending time with his grandchildren, playing acoustic guitar and reading. He's not chasing fame anymore. He's enjoying life quietly on his own terms. And perhaps that's why people love him even more now, because he's real. He's not trying to be perfect. He's just being Keith. He represents every person who's made mistakes but refused to give up. His story reminds us that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about finding reasons to live. How does Keith Richards still keep going after all these years? It's a question almost everyone has asked. Some say it's genetics. Others call it luck. But Keith himself gives credit to music, love, and laughter. He lives by rhythm, not just in his songs but in his daily life. He eats simply, stays active, and never stops playing the guitar. He says that the guitar keeps his hands and heart alive. He also stopped heavy drug use decades ago, proving that change is always possible, no matter how far gone you think you are. But more than anything, Keith's spirit keeps him alive. He has an unbreakable will, a kind of toughness that doesn't come from arrogance, but from passion. He once said, "As long as I can hold a guitar, I'll be fine." And it's true. Even now, when he steps on stage and strums that first chord, it's as if time stops. The crowd feels his energy, his humor, his charm. He doesn't have to move much or shout. Just his presence is enough to remind everyone that legends don't fade, they evolve. Keith Richards has lived long enough to see the world completely transform. When he started his career, there were no smartphones, no internet, and no streaming services. Music was shared through records, radio, and word of mouth. Today, one song can reach millions in seconds, yet Keith believes something special has been lost. He misses the days when music was a journey, when people listened to albums from start to finish instead of skipping from one hit to another. But he doesn't judge the new generation, he celebrates them. He often says that music will always survive no matter how it's shared. In interviews, he praises young artists who still play real instruments and write honest lyrics. For Keith, the spirit of rock isn't about being loud or famous. It's about truth. That's why even at 80, he's still relevant. His influence can be heard in every band that values emotion over perfection. In a world full of temporary fame, Keith remains permanent, a living